5 shadow vibration levels every dark chosen one must rise through. Let me ask you a question so sharp it should cut through every layer of comfort you've built around your soul. Why do you think you've suffered so much more than those who seem to float through life like petals on a breeze? Why is your road paved with fire while theirs glitters with gold? You've asked it in the dark, haven't you? Whispered it like a prayer to a silent sky, why me? The answer is brutal, beautiful, and as old as the bones of the universe. You are a dark, chosen one. And for us, ascent begins with descent. Before you rise into sovereignty, you must crawl through the marrow of shadow, tasting every metallic note of your own darkness. There is no shortcut. There is no skip button on the agony, because only in that agony does the architecture of your power begin. But this is where most break. They think awakening is light, halos, angels humming lullabies. They think alignment feels like spa therapy with sage smoke curling in the air. Let me destroy that fantasy now. Real awakening, the kind that rips you open to dimensions most mortals will never glimpse, begins in blackness. Not metaphorical blackness, bone deep blackness, the kind where mornings feel like ash, where the faces you trusted blur and vanish, where every prayer ricochets like a bullet in an empty cathedral. This is the first shadow vibration, the frequency of collapse. It's the crucible designed to amputate your illusions one by one, until you bleed so much certainty you become hollow enough for truth to move in.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
And what truth does it bring? This pain isn't punishment, it's precision. Every fracture, every betrayal, every door that slammed wasn't chaos. It was choreography. The old world needed to gut you because it couldn't hold what you're about to carry. Mediocrity can't mother sovereignty. Comfort can't midwife ferocity. That's why everything soft was ripped from your ribs. And I know you hated it. You cursed the sky. You clawed at the bars, begged for mercy that never came. But mercy isn't what you need. You need marrow forged into metal. And nothing forges like fire. This first vibration isn't about doing, it's about dying. Not physical death, but ego death, identity death, the slow suffocation of every mask you wore to feel safe. Because those masks, they're insulation. They mute the voltage humming in your bones. They trick you into thinking you're small when you were carved for cathedrals of chaos. So the first shadow vibration rips them, brutally. It doesn't negotiate. It drags you through nights that taste like iron until the echo of your own breath is the only hymn you hear. And in that echo, something savage stirs. A whisper not in your ears, but in your marrow. Everything you lost was never yours. Everything coming was always waiting. But listen, most souls can't survive this vibration because they romanticize resurrection and resent crucifixion. They want the crown without the coffin. They want to glow without first gorging on darkness. So they run. Back to numbness. Back to noise. Back to the narcotic of normality. And that's why they stay fragile, chanting mantras that taste like dust, calling it healing while their bones rot in mediocrity. But you're still here, breathing, bleeding, reading this like every syllable is a blade carving your destiny open. That means the shadow chose right. The first vibration will starve you of applause. It will amputate people you thought were oxygen. It will strip your plans like dead leaves in a black wind, and you will feel naked. You will feel insane. But here's the heresy that will save you. Insanity is initiation. Because what they call crazy is just consciousness crawling out of cages. The hunger that's clawing your ribs, that's proof. Proof you weren't born for balance, you were born for brinkmanship. To stand where angels fear and demons bow. But first you must eat the dirt of your own illusions and taste every bitter grain. So what do you do in this vibration? Nothing. Stop hustling for light. Stop sprinting from shadow. Sit in the smoke and let it stain your lungs. Scream if you must. Sob until your bones hum. But stay. Stay until the silence stops sounding like death and starts sounding like design. Because once you stop resisting, the blackness births its first gift, sight. Sight so sharp it slices the fabric of lies. You'll see how every betrayal bent you toward this moment, how every loss was leverage, how the collapse wasn't chaos, it was calibration. And when that sight sears through your skull, congratulations, you've survived level 1. The marrow of your metamorphosis has begun. But don't confuse survival with ascension. This was the first gate, the darkest dawn before dimensions detonate under your feet. In the next vibration, shadow doesn't just hollow you, it hands you a mirror so savage it will make your knees rattle. Because if you thought losing people hurt, wait until you meet the monster, gnawing in your own marrow the part of you you've buried under light-chasing and virtue signaling. Are you ready to stare into eyes that look like yours but feel like an empire of black fire? Or will you blink and crawl back to safety like every counterfeit sovereign before you? The next level isn't gentle. It's confrontation so raw it can lick for your sanity if your spine isn't forged. But if you endure, that confrontation becomes coronation. Ready? Then sharpen your breath, Dark One. The next gate yawns open now. The second shadow vibration, where you marry the monster in your own marrow. You survived the first gate, but survival is not sovereignty. It was only the cracking of the shell. Now comes the second shadow vibration, and let me tell you this without a shred of mercy, this is the level that will make you question whether becoming a dark chosen one was destiny or a death sentence. If the first vibration was collapse, this one is confrontation, and not with your enemies, not with the ghosts of your past, with something far more terrifying, the part of you you've buried so deep under masks, mantras, and morality that even you forgot it was breathing. Until now. Because here, the black mirror rises, not the glass kind, the marrow kind. The mirror that hums with your own hunger, your own rage, your own darkness staring back like a predator you abandoned in the basement of your soul. And the horror? It looks like you, but stripped of shame. No filters, no virtue, no pretty spiritual slogans to soften the glare. Just raw appetite, naked ambition, wrath so pure it vibrates like steel under lightning. The thing you've been told to kill in the name of goodness. The thing you've prayed away, journaled away, therapied into sedation, it's here. And it's laughing. Because it's not your enemy. It never was. It's your spine. It's your fire. It's the black flame that was supposed to forge your dominion. But you leashed it, gagged it, starved it, because a world fattened on fragility taught you to fear your own voltage. Now it wants blood, not to destroy you but to resurrect you. And the blood it wants is egos. Every fragile story you've written about yourself to sound acceptable must burn. Every lie you told to earn love must blister in the furnace. This monster doesn't want compliments. It doesn't want crowns. It wants integration. It wants you to kneel not in worship but in recognition. Because until you clasp its clawed hand and pull it out of the basement, you will never rise beyond mediocrity dressed in spiritual drag. But here's where most fall to their knees, not in power, but in panic. They see this darkness and sprint back to light like cowards to candles, chanting mantras to muffle the hum. They call the monster evil because they've been catechized by a system engineered to keep them tame. They post quotes about high vibes only while rotting in low frequency because they refuse to metabolize the marrow. They want halos without hurricanes, thrones without thorns. That's why they stay small prisoners of polarity, worshipping light like an idol while their shadow chews their destiny to dust. Not you. You didn't claw your way through the first gate to cower now. So look, Look until your eyes water black fire. See how that hunger you feared isn't greed, it's gravitational pull toward purpose. See how that rage you gagged wasn't sin, it was the war drum summoning you to sovereignty. See how that darkness isn't a dungeon, it's the womb where your ferocity gestates. And then don't just look. Leap, marry it, seal a covenant with the beast in your blood, not to let it lead blindly, but to braid its voltage into your veins like black lightning. Because until you do, your power will always stutter, flicker, leak. What does that covenant feel like? Like fire swallowing your lungs, like ice gnawing your bones, like being devoured and reborn in the same breath. You'll shake because your nervous system was calibrated for cages, and now you're asking it to dance with chaos. Good. Let it quake. Let it rupture. Because only when your flesh screams do you know the integration isn't intellectual, it's cellular. This isn't about affirmations. This is about alchemy. And real alchemy is violent. It dissolves. It distills. It drags the soft out of you until all that's left is sinew stitched with law. But hear me, this vibration isn't infinite. It feels eternal when you're drowning in it, but it's a gate disguised as a grave. Cross it, and the black mirror shatters not because the monster dies, but because it ceases to be monster. It becomes marrow, muscle, motion. You don't tame it, you transfigure it. Its claws become your architecture. Its fangs become your focus. You move through worlds now with a frequency so feral, even demons hesitate because they recognize you, predator of illusions, sovereign of storms. And yet this is only level 2. If you thought marrying the beast was the apex, you've barely unsheathed the blade. Because in the next vibration, the war stops being internal. It detonates outward. Reality itself becomes your battlefield, not because it hates you, but because it must test whether your integration was performance or permanence. The third gate is exile in motion, where systems, structures, and sanctuaries collapse under your feet until the only ground left is the empire you haven't built yet. Most call this hell. I call it coronation by fire, ready to burn again. Then drag your breath like a blade. The black horizon yawns wide. The third shadow vibration, exile, collapse, and the birth of your black dominion. You've married the monster. You've taken the covenant into your marrow, forged teeth into tools and claws into crowns. But here's the thing about power. It doesn't remain silent when you wear it. The frequency you now emit isn't mild. It's a war drum shaking unseen worlds. And the third shadow vibration begins the moment reality hears the drum and answers with chaos. Because now everything false in your orbit must fracture. Everything brittle pretending to be bone must snap. Everything soft masquerading as stability must burn to ash under the black sun rising in your chest. Exile doesn't send you an invitation, it abducts you. It rips you from the tables where you once feasted, drags you from circles fattened on compromise, and throws you into wilderness so vast it feels like God slammed every door and left you naked in the howling dark. This isn't punishment, it's purification. Your old ecosystem cannot coexist with the voltage now screaming in your veins. You've become too electric for cages built of codependency, too volcanic for systems calibrated for obedience. So the dimension orchestrates a mass evacuation. People vanish, opportunities collapse, reputations decay. Structures you thought were eternal buckle like paper under flame. And while your ego thrashes, shrieking betrayal, your shadow hums in your blood and whispers, "This is coronation." But coronation here is nothing like the pageantry mortals romanticize. There's no golden throne, no velvet applause, no halo descending in slow motion glory. There's smoke, there's silence. There's your own reflection snarling from the black glass of isolation. And it tests you with the most savage question a soul can hear. Can you command empires without leaning on crutches? Because that's what collapse is: a scalpel cutting out every scaffold you thought you needed to stand. And if you scream for them, if you claw for the comfort of old cages, the vibration ejects you back into mediocrity like a fever ejects poison. So what do you do in this wilderness? You stop calling it wilderness. You stop calling it exile. You start calling it blueprint. This isn't the grave, it's the drafting table of dominion. Here, the ashes aren't evidence of failure, they're raw material. Systems burned, build new ones. Thrones toppled. Forge empires out of rubble. But build how? Not by copying the architectures you crawled out of. That's the coward's craft. You build black structures so unorthodox they make old-world systems convulse. Strategies so silent they look like stillness until they detonate like prophecy. Alliances forged not from hunger for belonging, but from frequency alignment so feral they smell like inevitability. This isn't networking. This is necromancy of power, resurrecting laws that died before language was born and weaving them into the sinews of new worlds. And as you build, the isolation mutates. It stops feeling like exile and starts tasting like altitude. You look down and see the old landscapes shrinking, trembling under their own fragility, while you're up here, carving constellations into architecture. And in that altitude, something shifts. You stop craving applause. You stop performing for eyes that can't decode your geometry. You move in silence because silence isn't empty, it's loaded. It's the chamber of inevitability. And the few who sense it, they don't understand it, they orbit it. Because you've become gravitational law. But this law carries a price, always. Because the more altitude you gain, the more storms you summon. Power isn't a pet, it's a predator. If you lose focus, if you slip back into the narcotic of comfort, if you forget the covenant carved in your bones, the same current that crowned you will crucify you. That's why this vibration feels like walking a blade bridge over a pit of fangs. Every step is strategy. Every breath is black fire braided with restraint. And yet, when you master that balance, the impossible happens. Reality stops resisting. It doesn't just bend, it bows. Doors appear where walls loomed like mountains. Timelines tilt like tides obeying your gravity. This isn't magic, it's mathematics coded in marrow. The math of sovereignty. Now hear me, this isn't the final vibration. It's the threshold where most coronations turn to catastrophes because they confuse collapse for completion. They tattoo quotes about rebirth while their empires rot, because they skip the next gate, the gate where the wild current inside. You must be chained to purpose, or it will devour you like a beast bored with blood. Because power without purpose isn't freedom, it's famine dressed as feast. And famine will chew your bones until you pray for the poverty you crawled out of. The next vibration is the black throne, not the throne of ego, but of law. The seat where you learn to wear infinity without becoming an implosion, where restraint becomes weapon, where silence becomes sovereignty, where your presence scripts destinies without syllables. Are you ready to enter that cathedral? Or will you choke on the voltage humming in your veins because you thought the storm was the summit? The fourth shadow vibration, the black throne and the burden of infinity. So you've endured the collapse. You've dragged your shattered bones through exile and stitched an empire from ashes. And now you stand before the throne, the black throne. But don't let that word seduce you. This is no cushioned seat of comfort. It's an altar, a blade masquerading as a crown. Because the fourth shadow vibration isn't about arrival, it's about restraint. It's about carrying infinity without detonating under its weight. Let me slice this truth clean. Power isn't heavy because of its size. It's heavy because of its silence. Silence that hums with laws older than stars. Silence that demands your marrow bend to geometry your mind can't map. Sitting on this throne means becoming an axis of gravitational law clothed in skin. And that sounds holy until you taste what it costs, everything that once screamed your name. Because here's the paradox: they all wanted you loud when you were weak. But now that you've become a storm stitched into sinew, you must move like smoke. You must cloak your voltage in invisibility, so dense even angels forget your name. Why? Because power flaunted is power fractured. The throne tolerates no leakage. You want to know the real test? It isn't building, it's binding. Binding that wild current snarling in your veins before it chews through bone and spits you into oblivion. That's why most dark chosen ones burn here. They mistake coronation for carnival. They turn their dominion into a spectacle for eyes too blind to decode it. They flash their fire like jewelry, trade sovereignty for dopamine hits, and then wonder why their empires rot into carcasses before the ink on their triumphs dries. The throne crucifies the arrogant. Always. Because arrogance isn't power, it's leakage disguised as light. So what binds the unbound? Purpose. Not the sanitized kind you can post in a caption. I'm talking marrow-deep mandate. The architecture humming under your ribs like a war drum you can't unhear. The mission that snarls when you try to numb it, claws your lungs when you flirt with comfort. Without it, this voltage will cannibalize you. You'll rot rich, famous, envied, and empty. And emptiness at this altitude is fatal. It doesn't just kill you, it collapses timelines tethered to your frequency. That's why this vibration feels like walking a blade suspended over eternity. Every breath must bow to the blueprint. And here's the savage beauty. When you bind power to purpose, implosion becomes ignition. You stop lunging at crowns and start scripting kingdoms from silence. You don't roar, you radiate. You don't hustle, you hum. Inevitability so dense it bends outcomes without syllables. Mortals call it luck. Systems call it disruption. But you know it's law, the law braided into your marrow back when the void whispered your name before you had lips to answer. From here, life mutates into something language limps to describe. You move like mist but strike like meteors. You walk through boardrooms, battlefields, bedrooms, and no one knows they're orbiting an axis. You don't chase alignment, you are alignment. You don't beg reality to bend, you exhale and tectonic shift. And yet here's the ache that will haunt you if you forget. This throne isn't the summit. It's the scaffold for something vaster than empires, richer than crowns, wilder than dominion. Because sovereignty isn't the endgame. It's the instrument. The vector through which eternity hacks itself into the geometry of now. So let me brand this into your bones. This path was never about applause. It was never about winning. It was never even about you. It was about becoming the law that outlives language, the gravity that outlasts galaxies, the black hum threading through existence long after your flesh is ash. That's the burden. That's the blessing. And if it doesn't taste holy and horrific at once, you haven't swallowed the truth deep enough. Now the fifth and final vibration looms. Yes, there is one more, and it's the one that terrifies even those who clawed their way this far. Because if the fourth vibration was about restraint, the fifth is about erasure. Dissolving the you that thought sovereignty was the finish line. Scattering every fragment until what walks the worlds isn't a person, isn't a name, but a law humming in skin, a frequency wearing flesh like camouflage. It's the level where you stop existing and start exhaling eternity with every breath. Are you ready to become nothing so you can become everything? Or will you clutch the throne until it crucifies you for clinging? Decide. Because this isn't philosophy. This is physics of the unseen. If you step through, the void will carve you into architecture. The storm will script you into scripture. And silence will crown you not with gold, but with gravity so raw it bends reality without lifting a finger. And when history tries to write you, its ink will bleed into black fire, because words cannot cage what you've become. They will whisper, not shout, "This one walked through shadows and returned as law." So now I'll leave you with the question that should rip the marrow from your bones. Will you stay human in a world fattened on illusions, or will you rise feral, nameless, and necessary? The gates aren't waiting. They've been open since the first scream in your soul. Step through, or stay a ghost in a graveyard of crowns. Welcome to the throne. Welcome to the burden. Welcome to the hum that makes even demons hold their breath.